Hi everyone, my name's Greg Alchin and I work for All Equal and I am an MVP in developer technologies and I'm passionate about accessibility. And what I want to talk to you today is about the design decisions that we make and how they influence others. So let's have a look where we can go. The most important thing to remember is that when we create anything, whether it's an Office document or an app or whatever, it's about changing how people feel, think, and act. It's not just this straight dump of information. It's the emotion, it's the thinking, and then it's the action. Now, for most of us, we have this shared intent. We want it usable by all, and we want it engaging for all. And of course, we want it to work with the personal device settings that we have on our devices. And whether you're on a PC or a Mac or on a iPhone or a Google phone, there's a stack of inbuilt accessibility features on those. But one of the things that it requires us to do is think about how we design content and design apps for that area. Now, in reality, what happens though is because of the design decisions that we make, only about 55% of people can actually use it from the start. There's another 25% of people who have problems with the design that we created. And so what happens is that it then gives them a very differential experience. On top of that, you've got another 20% of people where, well, they're just excluded altogether. And that's a significant number as well. So why does it go wrong? Well, we make assumptions about some of our users. Those assumptions limit our thinking. We have a lack of awareness of what our tools and techniques can do. Just yesterday, for instance, I was working with colleagues who were laying out their documents and said, oh, we can't make it accessible because of what we've done with tables. And I said, there was the problem. You haven't looked at how you could use paragraph styles and, pardon me, use columns and use sections to make it look and lay it out really nicely, but get rid of the problems. And then we have a quality assurance problem, because what happens is half the time, accessibility is an afterthought rather than something that needs to happen from the start. So what's our solution? The solution's really easy. It's about adopting inclusive design. And Microsoft has done a lot of great work in inclusive design. The Inclusive Design Toolkit is certainly worth downloading. And it has those 3 points: recognize exclusion, learn from diversity, and solve for one and extend to many. You can see there, it's about the mindsets, the methods, the tools that we use to achieve inclusion. And that's what it's about. But the first part is starting with our mindsets. So let's look at that. We need to design with inclusion in mind from the start. So what are the core questions you ask? Most of us only think about, well, what's our purpose? We may at times think about what's the response we want from people. A lot of the times we don't necessarily think about barriers. What are going to be the barriers to limit engagement and then limit action? It's the same as, for instance, when people export documents to PDF and you go, well, they're predominantly on mobile devices. That in itself creates a usability barrier, let alone an accessibility barrier. On top of that, it's then saying, how will I remove those barriers to provide equal access? And that's where at times there is an awareness gap, but also a capacity gap that we need to look at how we can fill. The first point's this: you are not your audience. As you can see, there's you up in the top of the pyramid, highlighted in yellow, and you're in the top of the pyramid there. And so anybody who is on the right-hand side of you is essentially okay. They will use your app. There's that other group in the middle that has difficulty with your app or your content. And then there's the last part, which is excluded. If you think that you are normal, that you are average, then you've made an assumption, and you've made a very terribly dangerous assumption. What we have to realise is that diversity is the norm, it's not the exception. And when you start to look at these diversity of ears here, imagine what the diversity is like between the ears. Now, just out of interest, the ear on the bottom right-hand side is that of Barack Obama's. And so here's the issue. Amazing differences here in all of these ears. Amazing. Think about the differences in our brains, how our brains are wired, the experiences that we've had. Think about the differences in how we see, how we talk, how we think. Diversity is the norm. It's not the exception. And this concept of the average person is a myth. When we have a look at it, we can take attributes of people and go, well, yes, you might be of average height, but you're not of average weight or reach or torso, shoulder length, waist, hips, legs. You may be average on some things, but not on everything. And remember, when we move from physical characteristics then into cognitive characteristics such as memory and language and knowledge and reading, vocabulary, curiosity, perceptual, cognitive and interest, you can be in different places. And it's not fixed, because how you are on a Monday morning compared to a late Friday afternoon can be completely different. And it can also change depending on the content that you're actually interacting with, because it's going to be based on your knowledge or your background in that area. It also changes with time with your body. The most important thing in here then is for us to know that disability is actually context dependent. What happens is, and I'll talk about myself as an example, I have a visual impairment. My left eye is a prosthesis, a plastic fantastic as I call it, or an artificial eye. In my right eye, I'm legally blind. Now, depending upon the design of the environment, depends on whether I can participate on the same basis. So if there's good contrast and a good font size, and I can reflow the text size, there's a whole range of things I can do, I can participate on the same basis. If I participate on the same basis, there are no barriers. I still have my impairment, but there are no barriers. And the definition of disability, and it's not just me who's coming up with this, we have this in the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, we have it in New South Wales legislation, we have it right around Australia and in New Zealand. It's working on this social model that disability equals impairment plus barriers. We may not be able to change a person's impairment, but we can change the barriers by how we design. If we remove the barriers, we essentially remove the disability. As an example, impairments are seen as a spectrum. So for me, yes, I'm permanently blind in my, as I said, in my left eye, and I'm legally blind in the right. But it could be this continuum of permanent, temporary, and situational impairments. Now, the solution that I come up with will benefit all of those different groups. So whether it's a physical touch, a vision, a hearing, speaking, pardon me, they're all things that we can benefit from. So when we design for one, extend to many, we can all benefit through that design. As an example, we've got to look at the fact that on US Census data here, there are 26,000 people roughly in America at the moment who have a permanent loss of one arm. There's another 13 million people who have a temporary loss of one arm because it's through an accident or injury. There's another 8 million people who are new parents and are nursing a child and trying to juggle tasks at home with one arm. When we create a solution for somebody with a permanent disability, there's 26,000, we have another 21 million who can benefit from that good design. The other thing is that impairment increases with age. On the Australian Bureau of Statistics data, Roughly 1 in 5 in the population has some form of permanent impairment. But any of us who have reached over 30 know that from around about 40, things start to change. You can't hear as well, can't see as well, can't move as well at times. And that what happens with wear and tear on the body is that by the age of 55, it's gone from 1 in 5 down to 1 in 3. And then at the age of 67, which is retirement age here in Australia, the incidence of permanent impairments is 1 in 2. So by the time that you pass away, if you live long enough, you will all end up with some form of impairment. That changes our use case, changes our business case. Whether it's permanent, whether it's temporary, whether it's situational, everybody will have some form of impairment. Now, we've got to learn from our audience as our next step here. Now, we can see here this young child and their parents have come up with their own life hacks to make things more accessible for their child. The same as people have made it easier for people to slice bread if you've got low vision or if you've got fine motor issues, because you can benefit from having a guide. Now you go, oh yes, why not buy sliced bread? Well, it depends on what thickness you want and what you want to do. And so having that simple guide provides that assistive technology in that case. But look at the hacks that your audience have done to engage with your content or your digital resource. And think about that your audience is multi-platform. One of the biggest challenges that I come across are people who are designing stuff on a large screen but not thinking about how it flows onto a mobile device or a tablet. The most important thing for you is this: your design decisions shape the ability of others. So when you choose a font, when you choose a color, when you choose a certain video or a graphic, that impacts on the ability of others to access, participate in, and contribute to on the same basis. Your decisions must include and enable, not exclude and disable. It's a conscious decision about how we design. So if we have a look around in the built environment, we can see some great examples of solving for one and extending to many. The classic example of that is the curb cut. Now, this one good example of inclusive design it was originally designed for people with a physical disability to enable participation on the same basis. That meant that they could get from one side of the road to the other. Now, everybody's benefited from that design, because whether you've got a shopping trolley, a stroller, or a work trolley, a push bike, have some other fine motor issues, or you're just drunk, it doesn't matter. You can all easily get up and down the footpath because of the curb cut. The inclusion of the ripple strips, which are in the centre of the curb cut, are an extra sensory marker for people who have vision impairments, so they know that they have come to a curb and they know to be more careful. It's just that little sensory clue that for people who have vision go, yes, I can see it's a curb cut. That extra little piece provides the sensory input they need if they are using a mobility cane. We also see lots of other things. Now, one of the classic examples is our modern motor vehicles. Now, older motor vehicles used to have things called bench seats. They were usually fixed. Now, you'll have a look at the modern car. It owes its heritage to the Top Guns of the 50s, because at that time they were just trying to design for the optimal average pilot. That created a problem. They took over 140 different measurements of thousands of different Top Gun pilots, started to design these new cockpits based on all that data, and the planes started crashing. In the investigation, it was, show me those average pilots. They couldn't show, of all the Top Guns they had measured, they could not find one pilot out of the thousands that met all of the attributes. Some had average arm length, some had average leg length or body length, but not one met them all. So they flipped their design around, and to cater for different leg lengths, what did they do? They put the cockpit seat on rails, similar to what we see now in modern cars. The same with the steering wheel. The joystick controls went up and down and in and out, the same as the squab height on the seat can go up and down. We catered for the different attributes in the body by enabling personalisation. The OXO grip is another example, designing for one and extending it to others. The owner of the company's wife had fine motor problems. He designed a nice, soft, easy grip for the potato peeler that she could easily grip and control. More and more people have found them useful, and that's where the company went from strength to strength, because it was embedding inclusive design in what it was creating. The same as something as simple as a D-shaped handle for a door. If it was a doorknob, anybody with fine motor problems, carpal tunnel, all sorts of things there, would be unable to unlock the door. You can be in a wheelchair, you can actually click it with your foot, you can do a whole range of things, but you can interact with that door lever rather than a doorknob. And of course, the Microsoft Adaptive Game Controller is a classic example of good inclusive design, because you now have people with significant physical disabilities who are able to participate on the same basis with games. So when you make something, you expand the utility and you expand the market of that product. In a lot of cases, you'll also decrease the risk. But what are essential solutions for some are actually useful for everybody. So what are some simple tips and tricks that we can all follow that will make life a bit easier for us? Well, the first one is clarity of thought. Writing clearly and writing with purpose. Not having anything of too complex, so making sure that your reading age is no more than 12 for your content. Where appropriate, of course, supplement it with text and graphics to help understanding. There are simple things that you can do. The same as adding good structure, using heading 1s, heading 2s, heading 3s, list styles. Why is that really important? Well, in a Microsoft Office document, what it does, it actually embeds a small piece of code in the document. So if they're using Microsoft Narrator or VoiceOver, they are then able to, a person who is using those screen readers is able to interact on the same basis. Now, that's absolutely crucial, because a sighted person, when they look at a document, can go, right, I can see what the heading structure is, I can see what the overall story arc of the document is. If it's all just set up as a style of normal, but visually you've changed it, the person who is blind doesn't know the structure of the document, nor can they navigate, because we can skim from heading to heading. If they are using their screen reader, of course, they can skim from heading to heading using that a keyboard shortcut or a gesture to enable them to navigate. So we provide equal access to the structure and the navigation just by having good heading structure in our documents. Having that semantic structure makes a huge, huge difference. The other one's contrast. There are rules around, and they're essentially based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They are an international building code for anything digital. And yes, they do impact on anything that you create with 365, because those guidelines are technology neutral. They can apply to a Word document, a PDF, a PowerPoint, you name it. So one of those issues is contrast. There's a range of those color contrast tools around. This is one by the Patchoulio group. It's called Color Contrast Analyzer. And as you can see, it's a simple matter of using the eyedropper to pick up the background color and the foreground color, and it tells you whether that resource passes the accessibility guidelines. There's nothing worse than creating something and going, oh, it's hard to read. Now, one of the problems that we've got with an aging eye is that the amount of light we let into our eye from the age of 20 to the age of 60 actually decreases quite significantly. You can only see a third of the light that you did at the age of 60 that you could when you were 20. And so when you've got young designers going, yep, it's fine for me, I can see, without objectively testing it, 9 times out of 10, what you're doing is creating barriers for people. Usability barriers and accessibility barriers. So being able to get good, strong contrast is something that you want to look at. The same as this tool is really good because it can also check for color blindness as well. The other thing is meaningful links. Oh my goodness. If you are listening to a screen reader and you're hearing this click here, click here, click here, you have an accessibility problem, but you have a usability problem, because if you've heard 25 click here's on a page, which one do you know to click on? The other thing is looking at what are recognizable links. You want to, rather than using the click here or the more, it's putting the link in context. So it might say, download this resource. And you could then highlight that phrase or those particular words to link to that action rather than click here or more. Doing that makes it far more usable for everybody. And that's the thing. Accessibility and usability are intertwined, but it's based on this fundamental methodology of good inclusive design. Another one to think about is don't rely just on color. On the screen here, we have a question which says, which is the right angled triangle? And it has 4 on the screen: green, blue, red, yellow, or don't know. Now, if it's just on color, then you're going to have a problem if you've got a vision impairment. What we can do, and again, if you've got color blindness, you're going to have problems there, because you'll go, well, I'm not going to see red as red or green as green. And we know that 8% of our male population is colorblind. The simple addition of a number onto those triangles, so green is now a 1, blue is 2, red is 3, yellow is 4, provides another attribute. It therefore allows a person who is sighted to make an appropriate input onto that question. The same happens with other media alternatives too. So here we have a simple video player. There's a couple of things missing if you're deaf and hard of hearing, and if you are blind or have extreme low vision. We need to add closed captions, and we also need to add audio descriptions. Now, Microsoft Stream is good at doing some basic closed captions using the AI, but the trick in there, of course, is that you actually have to go in and just tidy it up, because it's the same as any good AI. It's pretty good, but it doesn't quite always hear everything correctly. And so what you want to do is just go in and tidy those up. But providing a good transcript, providing a good closed captions as an example, means that it is usable to people who are deaf and hard of hearing. But what it also does is for people who travel, they will go, oh, right, I'm in a quiet car on the train, or I'm on a bus. They will use the captions as a way to interact with the content, but still be aware of their surroundings. The same as for people who it is not their dominant language. Well, it'll improve their ability to understand what is happening because they can read it and they can hear it. Audio description is a whole new level, because it's, look, just like alt text, it's adding a description to what the visual content, and there's an art and a science to getting the right amount of audio description in any video. And that's for a conversation for another day. But your player has to be capable of handling that feature as well. The issue is we don't want to preclude people. The other thing is, in all of this, is that good inclusive design actually improves your social ranking. So, for instance, by having closed captions in a video, one of the things that happens is that you can not only search for the name of the video, you can search for content within the video. So your rankings up on Google or Bing are going to improve because you've got captions on your content. There's a whole stack of other resources and other things that we can look at. What we've just done is dipped our toe in the water of a whole range of features here. So have a look at the Microsoft Inclusive Design Toolkit, Windows Dev, accessibility best practices, go to the W3C, the World Wide Web's accessibility standards. The Centre for Inclusive Design's benefits of designing for everyone is a must read, as is Cat Holmes' Mismatch. Just know this, that when you design for inclusion from the start, you actually make a better product because you've thought about all of the users and therefore come up with a better solution. As the Centre for Inclusive Design says, the benefits of that is it benefits everybody. Now, Megan, have we got any questions as we head to near our end time?
We do, and we've had some very enthusiastic discussion on the side. The closed captions in your presentation, is that through PowerPoint on the Mac or is that through this meeting?
That's through this meeting.
Ah, so you turned them on from your end. We hadn't talked about it at the start. So we have a Mac user who's been another presenter. Actually, we've had challenges with the Mac experience, so it was good to know that they can have that as well. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded soon. The other question though is also the name of the accessibility checker that you use. What is that?
That's called Color Contrast Analyzer, and it's by the Patulio Group, PACIELLO, Patulio Group. It's a free resource and it works on PC and Mac.
Thanks, Greg. Those are all the questions. I've answered a few additional ones. Thank you so much. I personally found that really interesting and some of the stuff that you're talking about. And I know, as you say, I'm sure we could talk about it for hours because it's probably so deep and complex, but even that was really valuable and really fascinating.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone, for dialing in. Thanks, Greg.
Bye.